Hello everybody, working today with some alder trees. This one a little bit droopy, should have had a drink this morning, but I will give it a darn good soak once I've finished giving it a bit of a trim, and it'll soon perk up again. They are very thirsty trees, alder. If we have another hot summer like we had last couple of years, then this will have to sit in a tray of water, because otherwise it'll be just wilting by mid-morning, even if you water it first thing. So you do need to bear that in mind if you're growing alder. I always put more organic matter in my mix with alder trees, just to give it a bit more of a reservoir for holding water, to give you a bit of a twirl. And the can's there for scale, and it's got a really nice shape, this tree. I'm a bit annoyed with myself that I didn't repot it this year. I had meant to, and despite being in lockdown and what else was I supposed to be doing, I didn't actually get round to it. So it'll definitely need to be repotted next spring. So let's see if I can give you a little better view of the trunk. There's this lovely sinuous curve, fabulous taper. I'm really pleased with this tree, and although the roots aren't classically radial, they do have a certain something, I think. Let's see if I can't zoom you in a little bit on those roots. Bit shady under there, but yeah, great roots. So back to the tree itself. Grab my scissors, and I'm just going to be trimming it back just lightly, just to keep it in shape, really. Doing some directional pruning. I want the shoots to go in a certain direction, and so where a leaf is pointing in that direction, I can prune there, and I should get a shoot to come off in this direction. That shoot was actually shading out the apex here, which is just beginning to shoot, so that'll give that a chance to recover. As I say, these are very thirsty trees and very hungry trees. They do need quite a lot of feeding, but they bulk up very quickly, and they start to look old and gnarled quite quickly, which is great. As I've often said, bonsai is about art and horticulture, but it's also about illusion. There's an element of magic to it when you're trying to create the illusion of a tree that's 100 years old, 200 years old, when in reality it's only 20 or 30 years old. So you have to have a certain amount of suspension of disbelief, as they say. But a tree that starts to take on the characteristics of an older bark at an early stage is obviously of great benefit when it comes to bonsai. And alder is one of those trees. So I'm gonna cut away a couple of these shoots that are growing, covering the bark, and a couple of leaves as well, just so you can get a better view of the trunk. There's a branch growing there which is in the wrong place, so I'll get rid of that. And that's probably all the work I'm going to do to this tree for today. There are a couple of small shoots that have yet to extend, and as they keep poking out of the outline of the tree, I will give it another trim. Just take off individual pieces that escape the outline of the canopy, following that same principle of cutting to an outward facing bud in the direction I want it to go. So now we've removed a little bit more of the foliage. Let's see if we can't get a better close-up of the trunk. Yeah, really nice lines, and I am pleased with the root base, even though it's not a classically beautiful root base. Let's move that can. It's done its job, and you can see really good strong roots, making this look like a strong tree holding itself, perhaps by the edge of a river or something. Okay, so I'll show you a couple of photos of some trees I've already worked on, much smaller, as you'll see when you compare them to the can, but Alder does make a nice small tree as well as a larger one. This little Alder started life as a cutting. In fact, 5 years ago it was indeed a cutting, and as you can see, I've already got some fine textured bark. It's already beginning to show some more elderly characteristics. I'm going to trim back this branch, which is doing a strange L shape maneuver, which I don't like, so I'm going to cut it back to one of these little shoots here, like so, and I'm going to take off this piece in favour of this becoming a new leader. So I'm going to take off this little side piece here as well. I'm going to take off this tall piece here in favour of this new shoot being a new leader. There we go. That should be a nice new leader coming up here. I envisage this being, another one of those small trees. I'm going to cut this shoot back just so they don't compete with this. I do want this to grow up, and once it gets to a certain length I can put some wire on it for some movement to continue this sort of sinuousy trunk line. Looking for a finished tree, yeah, sort of about here, maybe 6 to 9 inches, and whatever that is in your centimeters. Okay, here's a slightly larger specimen of the common alder. Let's give you a quick 360 of this. As you can see, it's been sprouting quite nicely. I do have a couple of pieces of wire on it from last year, which at the moment I can see it isn't biting in, but probably will be if I leave it on too much longer, so I shall need to keep a close eye on that. Pot needs a good clean, and the bench where I have had this sitting under a tree, the pigeons have taken to roosting in, and as you can imagine, pigeons doing what pigeons are doing. They've been doing their doings in my pots, which I don't know whether that would be good feed for the trees or not. Possibly not. A bit too high in nitrogen maybe, but yeah, so I wired this secondary trunk out. Again, this is the form of the crown that I'm aiming for. Going to remove some of these shoots that are shooting too close to the front. I'm tempted to leave that one and maybe wire it once it's hardened off a little bit. So I'm going to leave that one for now, but shorten this one back certainly. Just remove a couple of these leaves to give you a better view of the trunk line. We do have a big scar where it was chopped, and a portion of deadwood. Now a lot of people will tell you that deadwood has no place in a broadleaf tree, but I disagree. I see it all the time in nature, and actually I like it. I could go with this as the front of my tree, I suppose. No big scars, but also quite dull. I don't know, let me know what you think, but I far prefer this view, which tells the tale of an old tree that survived a lot that nature's thrown at it, than this view, which, whilst nice, it doesn't tell that tale. And the reality of it is this tree could have either front or back, but I prefer my front. So let me know. Pop your thoughts into the comments below and say, Sid, you're barking up the wrong tree, or yeah, like that, whichever it is. So just pruning back the longer shoots just to keep it within that kind of bubble. Okay, so this piece, I'm going to leave it with the possibility of wiring it across here at some point. It can always be cut off at a later date. Nothing has to be done yesterday. Okay, so looking at that piece, it's a bit long and a bit straight. I'm going to shorten that back just a little more. Okay, let me see if I can't give you a bit of a close-up of that deadwood. It has some good strong roots. This section of the trunk is still alive. The cambium is rolling over nicely. I will need to treat it and maybe do a bit more carving and treat it with some lime sulphur this year. Likewise, this scar is going to need a little bit of carving and treating as well, but yeah, that's about it for this one. So tell me what you think, guys. Let me know in the comments below whether you like the back for the front or the front for the front. What are you up to, Coops? You woke up, have you? Cooper-doo, you woke up? Have you? Okay, so this too is an alder. This is a slightly different species of alder. This the last being a common alder, but this is the royal alder. As you can see, I chopped the trunk. Here it has a bit of an ugly old scar just there, but not so ugly that I can't live with it, and it's beginning to grow me a nice canopy. I did put a bit of movement into the central leader here, but I'm not going to grow this in a sort of left right style. What I am going to try and do is just create, you know, a nice compact crown on this tree. Yeah, nice compact crown on this tree. There's a couple of things I do actually want to do to this tree today, apart from pull a few weeds, which I can do off camera. I have some buds that are growing up the trunk here, and I'm just going to rub those off. I don't really need the tree putting its energy into creating branches where I don't need them. Knowing this tree, it'll probably pop a whole load more in response. So we'll give it a quick 360. And one of the things that I'll show you that I do want to change is this particular back branch. I have two branches that come out almost one above the other. The top one is quite long and it's quite straight and quite boring, whereas the lower one has got some movement in it, or a little bit more movement in it. And so I'm going to remove the uppermost branch, like so, which gives some taper to this branch, and that branch has just got that little bit more movement, and it already has some more ramification, in that it's in three. There are already three sub branches, so that long straight bit I'm going to try and take some cuttings with these pieces. It will root quite easily actually if you just pop it in a glass of water and leave it on a windowsill. It'll root quite happily, so I'm going to put that to one side, not lose it. And then I'm just going to trim some of these pieces. Imagine that being the crown, so I have an imaginary line in my head, and I'm just cutting anything that's in danger of quite soon poking out of that line. There's a piece here which is kind of growing straight out towards me, this being my front, so I'm going to cut it back to this leaf where hopefully it'll break, and start heading back out in that direction. And that's pretty much it for this tree. I'm quite pleased with its development. If you look in the playlist, which I'll link in the description and the end screen, you can see a bit of its progress. Okay, last of the alders for this video. This is another royal alder. This was a cut-in I took from the tube I just showed you, maybe 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. They are quite a rapidly growing tree, especially if they're given plenty of water and feed. This tree has grown very well. Another thing that is nice when they are this small is that they are inherently flexible, and take wiring quite well. So what I'm going to do with this tree, although I'm not going to repot it into a different pot, I'm going to try and wire it just to get some movement into this otherwise quite straight trunk. Because they're very flexible, doesn't particularly need a very heavy gauge of wire. I mean, I could use something like this, which I think is 2mm, but I think that's possibly overkill on a tree this flexible. Okay, so I'm going to use this, which is 1.5mm, and I just want a piece that's a little bit longer than the length of the tree. And then I am simply going to try and, first of all, I'm going to take off this lower shoot at the base. I could leave it as a sort of secondary trunk. It would be in a good position for that. If this branch was on the other side, that would work quite well. With this branch placed where it is, it's not really going to work because this branch will shade out this secondary trunk. So let's lose that before we start. Again, I may try and put that in a little jar of water or something and see if I can root that. So just going to try and anchor that into the soil close to the base of the trunk, and then again, if this is the first time you've seen me wiring a tree, I do apologise. Not a pretty sight. I always say if you want to learn how to wire a tree, there are plenty of better people to learn how to wire a tree from than me. I don't show my trees in a bonsai show. A lot of bonsai shows don't like trees that are wired anyway, but if they do allow trees that are wired, then they expect a high standard of very neat, perfectly coiled wire, and that isn't me. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of movement into the base of the trunk there, and then remembering that it needs to be in 3 dimensions. Okay, so those look quite exaggerated bends, but in actual fact, as the tree fattens, the angle of these bends will visually decrease. So there we go. I'm going to shorten this branch, which is now almost downwards, which isn't any good, and I'm going to lose this branch here, shorten that, again possibly some nice cutting material there, and I'm going to cut back the growing tip, and that's it for this tree. Again, it's going to stay in this pot. It's going to be well fed, well watered, sat in a tray of water in the hottest part of summer, so it can drink as much as it likes. I'll keep a close eye on this wire to make sure it doesn't cut in, and then we'll come back and look at this later in the year or next spring, depending on how things go. So let's give you a quick 360. As you can see, the trunk has got a 3-dimensional twist to it rather than a 2-dimensional flat plane. I might just put a piece of wire on that branch. The wire I've got here is a little bit thick, but it's actually better to put on a piece of wire that's a little bit heavier than one that's not heavy enough. Now I want the wire to come under that piece, that gives it an anchor, and it's not crossing over itself. Even I don't do that. Try not to entrap these leaves. And then I can just give that branch a little twist around, so it's a little bit more pleasing to the eye. Filling in this vector. So yeah, maybe we'll look at this in the autumn and the spring. In the spring, perhaps we'll give this a repot and we can check out the nibari on this tree. I've done this wiring blind without knowing what the nibari is like, but that's okay. That's something that we can possibly fix at a later date. So thank you all for watching. Please take care of yourselves and stay safe.